Florida, when I go visit my friend Congresswoman Green in Georgia and cross the state line, I don't carry with me my rights as a Floridian.
Right.
When I go to the swamp of Washington, D.C., I think it might be a crime to look at a gun, and unless you're a criminal. And so talk about how the rights of Floridians would be affected and how your work would be supercharged if we were able to get the Congress to have multi-state reciprocity.
Yes, sir, Congressman, and absolutely, you're 100% correct. And I just wanted to go on the record as well. So our gun store owners who are here today, the testimony you've heard, they are 100% correct. I can vouch for that. In fact, when I took office, a lot of my information came directly from Chris Smith. Chris came to me the minute I was sworn in, and he brought me a stack of background checks. And these things were over 18 months old, a whole list of consumers, of gun purchasers who had been waiting almost 2 years. And as I said earlier, the only reason they weren't waiting longer than that is that FDLE throws them out of the system after 2 years, and they have to start all over. So to answer your questions earlier, Congresswoman Green, about the difference between FDLE and the NICS system, Florida had the option to either run it themselves or use the NICS system. And Chris, if I'm not mistaken, we charge people, $5 for FDLE? So in other words, Congresswoman, our state actually makes money off that background check. And as you heard, if you get one of those false positives, it's not the FBI who tracks down the information. It's our own Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So Congressman Gaetz, you can imagine if I'm trying to purchase a firearm and I come up as a false positive, and the statute in Florida says they can take as long as they need to clarify the situation, there's no incentive for FDLE to hurry up. And as a matter of fact, when I talked to the representatives in the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, a lot of the issues we have with these delayed background checks, it's actually not the state of Florida. It's when people move to Florida from other states. So a good example would be California. They specifically told me that there were names on the list who had moved here from California. And in FDLE's opinion, they said California is the hardest state to get background check information from. Apparently, whoever does things in California, they answer 100 phone calls a day. So if you're caller number 101, they hang up on you and you've got to try again tomorrow. So, but again, to answer your question, should FDLE be running this? Should the feds be running this? Reciprocity? You can imagine if I'm calling from Tallahassee needing some information and I'm calling Sacramento, do you think they're going to be in a rush to give that information to Tallahassee? Or if the FBI were calling, who do you think is going to get their phone call returned first? So that's the incentive for my bill for next session. We're going to put a shot clock on FDLE. We're going to give them as much money as they need to do their job properly. But if they can't do it, worst case scenario, if we decide to use the NICS system, well, hey, whatever we need to do to not restrict people's Second Amendment rights, whatever we need to do to get that background check done in a reasonable amount of time, not 2 years, 3 days.
I want to drill down into this shot clock legislation that you're talking about, because I think it could have multiple positive effects laterally with other states and upward to the federal government. And as I understand the dynamic that the witnesses have testified to, we have other states and we have a federal government trying to use bureaucratic process to deprive people of their Second Amendment rights. And so rather than surrendering to that paradigm and having our citizens waiting oftentimes for little reason or no reason at all, what you're saying is that if people want to actively frustrate the Second Amendment rights of our constituents, they have precisely 72 hours to do so. And if they fail to frustrate the rights of our constituents in that time, we will vindicate those rights. We will go on offense, as you testified to. Do you believe that shot clock legislation, if passed in Florida, could have perhaps a positive and invigorating impact on some of these entities that seem to have lost their way?
Absolutely, 100%. And again, remember, all we're asking is that they turn the calendar back to 2018. This was the law of the land in the state of Florida prior to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So we're not asking for something we've never had before. We're asking to go back to how things used to be, and apparently things were done pretty effectively back then as well.